Welcome everyone to our presentation today, The Secret Lives of Lucy's Warblers. I'm excited to introduce my colleague Olya Weekley, who is our Applied Conservation Project Manager, a new title, recent promotion. Olya has been managing our nestbox program and our Lucy Warbler program for quite a few years now, and just has a lot of insights to share on all the data that she's collected in that time. And those trends we're seeing with Lucy's Warblers, just in time for them to start arriving in Tucson. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Olya.
Thanks so much, Kristen, and thank you everyone for being here. It looks like a very nice turnout for the live portion, especially. I know it's hard to carve out a little piece of time in the middle of the day, but thank you for being here. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. Oh, okay, perfect. So you should all be seeing my screen now. This is one of my favorite photos ever taken by Paula Redinger. A scraggly little fledgling of a Lucy's Warbler, but this is what we like to see. So over the past few years, we learned so much about the needs and preferences of Lucy's Warblers, but we haven't stopped, and there's still definitely more to learn about them. In this presentation, I'm going to go over some of our studies from the past, what we've learned, and some of the current ones and what we hope to learn. I'll finish up with some of the ways that you can get involved and some best practices for your own backyard. So first, who are Lucy's Warblers, right? Lucy's Warblers might not be your first bird that you notice. They're not super colorful or flashy, but they are easy to ID once you know what to look for. You may mistake them for a verdin sometimes because they are about the same size, small gray bird, but they don't have the yellow head of a verdin. Here's my cat. The males have a very nice rusty cap, but they don't usually show it as much because that's something when they're excited, they'll puff up their rusty cap. Or if you're looking down on them for some reason, or they just twist their head just enough for you to notice that they have a very nice rusty cap on top. The females they lack the cap altogether, or they have a very slight one as compared to the males. They also have a rusty rump. That's the area right above the tail here. These are all really good field marks, but you'll often hear them before you see them. And especially in early spring, soon enough, we're going to start hearing them all over the place. You just, when you know what to listen for, that is the best way to find them, because otherwise they're way up there in the tree, usually feeding around, hopping around, and it's kind of hard to get your binoculars on them. So I wanted to quickly play you a song of Lucy's Warblers for you to familiarize yourselves. It's like a simple trill with several pitch changes. I like this video a lot, but it cuts out a lot of the camera moving because they don't sit still very long. So this is just him. Whenever they do sit still long enough, that's the video, because otherwise it's just, okay, next branch, go. Looking for food, looking for mate. At the beginning has a better one. All right. But who is Lucy and why are Lucy's warblers called Lucy's warblers, right? So they used to be called mesquite warblers due to their really close ties to native trees, and to this native tree specifically. And some people even refer to them as a desert warbler because they nest in some of the like driest areas of the Sonoran Desert. So who is Lucy and how did that come about? Well, Lucy's Warblers was named by William Cooper for Lucy Hunter Baird, and that was the daughter of Spencer Fullerton Baird. Cooper, who named the bird, was not a collector, but he was a zoologist and one of the founders of the New York Lyceum of Natural History. And while Cooper did not collect birds himself, he did get to name some of them, the ones that were sent to him. And he decided to name one of them, the specific one, after the daughter of his associate. And Lucy, the person, actually developed her own expertise in natural history and exhibited a lifelong commitment to science. But in recent years, there have been a talk about doing away with human-associated bird names. And I really do hope that that does happen because I would really love to hear mesquite warblers once again rather than the Lucy's warbler. Lucy's are adorable, yes, but they're also very special as a bird themselves. They're one of only 2 cavity nesting warblers in the whole of North America. The other is the prothonotary warbler, which we don't really get here. They're also the only warbler to nest in the very lowland desert environment and the driest parts. So we do have yellow warblers nesting, but they are strictly riparian. Lucy's warblers have a pretty small distribution range as compared to some of the other species. They winter on the west coast of Mexico, but beginning about mid-March, they arrive into Arizona, which lies in the heart of their breeding range. And Tucson, marked here with a star, is the perfect space to study them because we do get a lot of them. And based on eBird observations, their breeding range has been expanding into southern parts of California, Utah, Colorado, and New Mexico. And like Jenny, I love a good migration map that shows you live movement. So here you see, this is February, and I hope you're seeing this now. So it's February, and most of the Lucy's are here in the western Mexico coast, and they occupied about the same type of breeding, or as the same type of habitat as they do here. And then starting about late February, you are starting to see them in migration here. And this is Arizona right here. So I'm going to go back real quick. So beginning of March, you can see it's a very quick migration. Big numbers are moving through. And here is where we have our Arizona. As you can see, some smaller numbers surrounding states. So this is the week of March 4th through 11. Mid-March, you see big circles. Big circles mean high abundance of Lucy's warblers. And April, there's still some coming up, but for the most part, this is when they're already starting to claim their territories, their nesting boxes, and starting to build nest is April. Their peak migration or peak breeding time is April and May. Some of them go into June, finish up in June. And then they get very quiet during the summer. So some people think that they are leaving during the summer, and some do, but for the most part, they're just quiet and harder to see. But most of the migration begins at the end of summer. As you see, August here, we're starting a slow trickling down into the Mexico area. October, November. Oh, at the end of October, there's a big jump into the wintering ground. So I think that's just fascinating to see where they go. And eBird does a really good job at visualizing that for us. Lucy's warblers breed most often in dense lowland riparian mesquite, bosque, or in other words, woodland. They are also found in Palo Verde, ironwood, cottonwood, galleries, and others, but their strongest ties are to mesquite trees. Lucy's warblers overwinter in Mexico in similar lowland riparian habitat, like I was saying, and some Lucy's do stick around in Arizona, like that Sweetwater Lucy that has been seen for the last few years, possibly the same one that Kirsten saw just last week. So Lucy's will spend almost all of their time in the tree canopies, foraging and nesting. So that's where you'll find them and go out looking for them. Right now, Lucy's are not here in great numbers yet, but soon enough, Arizona will fill with their beautiful song, and you'll be able to start noticing them literally almost anywhere you go, just because we are in the heart of their breeding range. They are insectivores, and their style of feeding is gleaning the foliage, which means that they spend a lot of time moving around the canopy and looking for small little insects. They primarily eat caterpillars and small winged insects, as well as spiders and little beetles, whatever is small enough to fit into their tiny beak. Currently, Lucy's warblers are identified as a species of conservation concern by Arizona Game and Fish, and a focus species for important bird areas in Arizona. And that's all due to habitat destruction and degradation in their breeding range. Large cavity bearing mesquites have become scarcer due to firewood harvest, declining water tables, development, and over pruning of mesquite trees in urban areas. In addition to this, scientific literature doesn't have a lot of information on Lucy's warblers. Their small range and their elusive behavior have caused them to be very understudied. So that means there's a lot for us to learn about them. Tucson Audubon's journey with them started back in 2015, when we started receiving multiple reports of Lucy's warblers using decorative houses like this on the left, and unconventional places like an out of order fountain or roof shingles, as you see on the right. This is the little Lucy going for its nest. For a long time, it was thought that Lucy's warblers do not use nest boxes, period. And that was due to a misquoted paper. That paper actually stated that Lucy's warblers did not use their nest box. But ever since then, it was quoted as Lucy's warblers don't. And it was probably due to the fact that the right type of nest box was not developed for them. So Tucson Audubon decided to conduct a multi-year experiment studying the dimensions of the artificial reported nests like we received in the mail and the natural cavities. And thus we came up with 8 designs, which we tested to identify the preferred one. To do that, we arranged these designs at 60 different points, and all the nest boxes, we varied them in volume, entrance size, number of exits, and the 12 boxes were placed in different order on each tree, so that would ensure that our data shows a preference for a specific design rather than a placement. And pay a special attention to this nest box here, which I will be talking about, and many of you are already familiar with it. The data gathered from 2018 to 2021 indicates a very strong preference for the triangle nest box design. The first 2 categories here are the triangles. They're just of 2 different volumes, so we just call them a large and a small triangle. The smaller volume triangle also got used a good amount of times, but what we noticed is that the Lucy's warblers would build up the sides of the nest box a little bit higher in our smaller volume nest box, which means they needed it to be a little bit deeper, and the large nest box is what they kept coming back for, and which provides that deeper nesting opportunity, and they didn't have to build it up as high. So this data proved that the large triangle really is the one that Lucy's warblers will go for. And this design was created by mimicking their natural nests in peeling bark and the splitting branches of mesquite trees. So whenever there's a really nice mature mesquite, a large branch may split under its own weight, or bark may peel off as it grows. These are all very old growth mesquites. And what we notice is that there is a 2-point of exit system. So we have one at the front here, and we can see a little bit of sky in the back. So they're able to come in from either side. They can escape from either side. And we kept seeing that in their natural nests. And that is exactly why we came up with something that looks like this, which is middle ground from having a completely enclosed nest box and something that is an open cup. So this is very specific to Lucy's warbler needs. And in fact, from the hundreds of nests we've studied so far, for the most part, we've only had Lucy's warblers nesting in these. There have been only about 5 nests that were created by house finches in these, but it's a very tight fit for them. So that's a very, very low percentage of those nests as compared to Lucy's warbler use. So you can really see how this is very specific to their needs and desires. An interesting byproduct of this experiment was finding out that Lucy's warblers will nest in very close proximity to each other if they are in very good habitat. That means they're not competing for food as much. There's plenty of food, and that usually is in pristine mesquite bosques and riparian areas, things like that. Literature did state that Lucy's nesting territories are as close as 30 meters in closed canopy mesquite bosques. Well, we were able to document them nesting only inches apart. In this picture, each one of these boxes has a female sitting on eggs, and we did document a separate female going to each one of those nest boxes, and they were coexisting, they weren't fighting, and they raised their chicks to fledging. And this is also in Mammoth, Arizona. If you've ever been there, they have a very nice trail system at 7B that is enclosed canopy mesquite bosque, and it's an excellent habitat for Lucy's warblers. With the use of our newly discovered triangle, we set out to figure out the other nesting preferences of Lucy's warblers. In order to figure this out, we conducted 2 studies. One of them was for height preference. And what we did is we installed nest boxes in a row like this on a mesquite tree. This particular one is Isabella Lee on the east side of Tucson. In 2019, we only went up as high as 9 feet to see if there's a preference in that range. And we saw that every time they went for, not every time, but I would say a good percentage of time, they would go for the 9 foot off the ground height. And we thought, okay, well, is this because that's their preferred height, or is it because that's the highest offered box that we have? So what we did is we included 2 more heights of 12 and 15 feet. And once again, they went for the highest available height at 15 feet. So it does seem that when they are presented with multiple options, they will go for the higher of the range, just because it seems like the predator being safe from predators is one of the reasons that we infer from this. But we have had them nest as low as like 3 feet off the ground. But when they have the availability of something higher, it is what they would go for. So what I tell people is that if it's in your backyard and you have some foot traffic below the tree that you're about to put up the nest box, higher is better. But you also want to consider your safety, going up on the ladder, things like that. So within the range that we suggest now is between 6 and 15 feet, because we know that they will nest in an area like that. But height is just one of the factors that to consider. I think there is more of a factor that they consider when selecting a nesting location, and I will go over that in a little bit. We also looked at direction preference, and we installed 4 boxes at each cardinal direction at 9 feet high. The data over the 3 years shows that there is a fairly even distribution, except for less selection for north exposure. So what does that mean? That may mean that there is no strong preference, or that another factor plays a bigger role, like cover or angle. And we would still encourage people to install their boxes shaded from afternoon sun, as that's important for a cavity nester, and that's not something we're really thinking about when we're putting them up in February and it's cold outside, but soon enough it will be pretty warm out here. Other aspects of Lucy's warblers' lives are still poorly documented or completely unknown. So we applied for a grant from North American Bluebird Society, and we proposed to study Lucy's warbler nest using cameras, which allowed us to have a 24/7 look at the species without having to be present at the nest and without disturbance to the birds. And what that allowed us to do is study the clips, and analyzing the nests, we were able to come up with a timeline like this. Our sample size is very small for now, but we hope to strengthen this timeline with additional observations and strengthen this data. So if we break this down, this nest. Okay, I don't know, that was a little bit of echo on my side. I hope you guys didn't hear it, but the nest building stage took about 12 days from when we started seeing their nest building start. And then they laid, so what they do is they line the nest box with little sticks from leaves of a mesquite tree. They create a little cup, and once that's done, they line the inside with feathers that they find around. Once they deem that as the perfect nest, they start laying eggs. They lay one per day, and depending on the clutch size, it can take us between 3 and 6 days. An average we've seen is 4 eggs, so that would be 4 days. Incubation takes about 15 days, a couple weeks from the first. And then it took in between 11 and 14 days from hatching to fledging. And what we saw is that also during incubation time is that only the female incubates while the male brings her food while she's on the nest. So that's very nice. And then hatch to fledge, at least one chick always fledged on day 11. That was really interesting. And then the other chicks followed within minutes, sometimes within hours. And we also had one that stuck around for 3 days before it decided to leave the nest. But it's okay, the parents are hanging out in the same tree and the siblings are there as well, being fed. So why do we need to know this kind of information? Well, first, it contributes to the existing knowledge about this species. And we can also use this information to inform some of our other decisions and actions. We can approximate the age of the chicks for banding of the little ones, for example, and we can show their reproductive success, meaning that the nest produced successful fledged birds. And speaking of birding or banding, sorry, in 2022, we started banding Lucy's warblers to find out even more information by being able to tell the bird to the individual level. And banding consists of capturing the adults using nets or grabbing nestlings from the nest and equipping them with a little metal band here, and it has little numbers and color bands that will tell us sometimes location where we banded these birds, as well as to individual size. So it's a unique combination of colors that we can, without having to catch this bird again with the binoculars, we can see, okay, so 2 black and 1 tan, and then go back to our records and be able to tell that this is an individual we banded in 2022 in the same area, and it's back again. And other things we can learn through this is to see if the adults come back to the same cavity or the general area year after year. It seems like anecdotally that is the case, but this would allow us to actually have data to support our anecdotal evidence. Also, if they have 2 broods and if they reuse the same nest for both of them, do they remain monogamous during the season and between years? And the same thing goes for the nestlings. Do they come back to the same general area where they hatched the next when they come back the next year? And if someone finds this bird dead, unfortunately, or if they capture it at another banding station across, like Mexico, for example, they can report the band numbers, and we get a little ping notifying us that the bird has been resighted. This is where it's at, and that provides a data point for us. It doesn't harm the bird. The bands are not tight on the leg and don't inhibit any type of movement. It's also a myth that the parents will abandon the baby birds if they smell humans on them. It's not true. The parents have contributed a lot of energy and time into raising these birds, and they will come back once the threat is gone. But it is a good myth to have, because we don't want just about anyone going out and touching nestlings. We hold specific federal and state permits to be able to handle birds, and we've gone through a lot of training to be able to do it safely for the birds and us. So 2022 was our pilot year, and we were able to band 12 Lucy warbler chicks. We're going to increase our effort this year, as well as to try to relocate the banded individuals from last year. And this year, we're also testing another design of nest box that features a smaller circular opening on each side of the nest box. So there's one circular 1-inch hole here, and then another one on the other side of this nest box. The goal is to firstly see if Lucy's warblers would use a nest box like this, and when presented with each design side by side. And if so, this has the potential of preventing predation by snakes or mammals in wilderness areas. It's a little less of an issue in our urban areas. And to prevent cowbirds from laying their eggs in their nest as well, because they can't fit into a 1-inch hole. So this again is more common in some areas than others. So this, coupled with another potential that we're hoping to see if chicken wire around a nest box would be a good option to prevent other predators. We're just looking into other things to constantly learn about Lucy's warblers, improve our understanding, improve our methods, and provide the best information for the public for installation of nest boxes, and a conservation plan for any type of big projects as well. And so if you live within the Lucy's warbler breeding range, you can be a part of our community science effort as well. We created a new recipe card to provide all the ingredients of a Lucy's warbler friendly yard. I will send you a link after this presentation via email, and I will also go over some of these here today for to talk a little bit more about what really makes a Lucy's Warbler friendly yard. First, I like to put this one as number one, as this is the best thing you can do pretty much. It is incredibly important to keep cats indoors. It's not only for Lucy's Warblers, it's for all wildlife. In this case, this is a real case that we captured on our camera. A stray cat, it wasn't even a homeowner's cat, a stray cat shook up the box trying to get into it, and thankfully the mom escaped from the other side. So again, the benefit of the two exit system. The eggs got a little shaken up, but thankfully they remained intact, and they did end up hatching that season. So we're grateful it wasn't a worse turnout, but it could have been much worse. It is also important to avoid insecticides in your yards, because warblers are insect eaters, and they rely on having the little bugs in their diet, especially important when they have little ones to feed, and they have to have the calcium and the protein to grow strong. Like most desert species, Lucy's warblers benefit from having supplemental water. The sound and the look of moving water especially attracts them. So you might capture a passing Lucy's warbler's eye with a fountain in your backyard. Consider installing one, or even a water dish is plenty. Just keep it clean and refill it as the water evaporates. Water attracts a bigger variety of birds than feeders do, in my opinion. So it's a good investment, and you don't have to make it super fancy. Here are some of the examples of water features. Some DIY bubblers. We offer some DIY options with our Habitat at Home page, or you can go as fancy as this motorized fountain here. Moving water is good, and you can start with a simple dish. Lucy's warblers and other small birds prefer to have a shallow ledge or a thin border what they can grip onto to drink. Instead of like a really deep bowl. Putting out a deeper bowl might, be a little bit better when the water evaporates, but actually if they can't reach it safely, they're not even going to go for it. So you can create that effect by putting some rocks to make it a shallow edge they can stand on, or if the rim is thin enough and grippy enough for them to stand on, that's also a good option. This also protects the quail chicks from drowning if you have those around, so it's a good thing to do all around. Of course, install the triangle nest box, the one we specifically designed for Lucy's warbler needs. Urban mesquites, suburban mesquites are capable of providing sufficient foraging opportunities, but oftentimes what happens is that they become so over manicured that there's no more buckling bark or splitting branches, and I understand it has to happen for safety reasons, but with the addition of a nest box, we can bring that back, that service that Lucy's warblers need, that crevice for them to use. So these are available for sale at our nature shop. They're only $10. We also sell them online for and I'll send those links out to you in the follow-up email, or you can make your own. We provide the plans on our website, and I'll also include that link in the follow-up email. They're pretty easy to make, and they use a cedar picket. We recommend that you install the nest box by the end of February, which is now. So if you haven't yet, go out today. No, I'm just kidding. You have some time, a little bit. End of February is good, but you still have a couple weeks before they are here in big numbers. and when they're starting to look for some of the cavities to occupy. If you go later than about mid-March, then you run the risk of a Lucy's warbler passing by your yard to look for a better place to nest. You want to install the nest box in or near a mesquite tree. In a mesquite tree is recommended. Dense foliage is, it seems like the dense foliage is something that they really prefer. From all of our studies and seeing all the ones that they have nested in, this seems like the factor that really makes a difference in their selection of nest boxes. So if you have your nest box out in a different way, I will actually go over that in the next few slides. It is okay to move it around. You want to east to north facing if you have like direct exposure to the afternoon sun. Otherwise, just keep it in the canopy is good. If you want to install multiple ones in your backyard, we recommend 20 feet apart to ensure that each one has an equal chance of getting used by a pair, because we're likely not in a very pristine mesquite bosque. You can put up multiple in the tree, and that just offers them options to choose from. So you're just doubling your chances that at least one of them will be attractive to Lucy's warblers and selected for their nesting needs. I use outdoor grade screws. You can use wire, but make sure that the wire doesn't allow the nest box to sway where the eggs might fall out in a windstorm or something like that. Also, you will have to loosen up the wire so that it doesn't strangle the live branch that you attach the nest box to. So you'll have to loosen that up every so often. The screw doesn't really harm the tree, just forms a scar over it. It's just like pruning a branch off. Each nest box will come with a direction sheet and a registration link. So please register your nest box with us so we can see our distribution. And this will also allow us to email you once a year to ask if you had a nest this year. And that will allow us to mark it in our database and see how you installed it, and then be able to have it in a data that, okay, this person had this Lucy's warbler nesting at this height, this direction, things like that. Some people like to experiment and put nest boxes in willow trees or other trees, ironwoods, other trees that Lucy's love. We always love to hear about that because we just don't have enough data points to suggest that. We know mesquite trees are the best. So if you wanted to play around with that and put it in a different type of tree, this will also provide us more information. For the upkeep of the nest boxes, we recommend that you clean it out after the breeding season is over. I usually do it in late winter so that it's at the same time I'm checking if the screws are still okay, if everything is nice and ready for the Lucy's warblers. You just have to take out the nesting material. You don't have to pour anything to clean it out or anything like that. Just take it out, and that will allow the Lucy's warblers pretty much a clean start. So any type of bugs or parasites that may have accumulated in their nesting material are cleaned out. With that being said, if it's not safe for you to go up and clean out the nest, it is okay. But if you want to help out the nesting birds here, we do recommend cleaning out the old one. So right now is a good time to go check on your Lucy's warbler nest boxes. And all you have to do is kind of pinch it out from one side. Excuse my cat. It is an indoor cat, just so you know. And that's just, gives them a clean start, a safe place to nest, and they'll be ready for another season. Of course, it's important to plant native plants for Lucy's warblers. Native plants do very well in our hot climate, like native plants to our region, of course. And not only do they provide the best food for local birds, but they also shelter the birds. They provide nesting opportunities, and they're actually really good for your water bill, right? Once established, these plants don't require any additional upkeep. They survive off the annual rainfall. Of course, our native velvet mesquite is our first choice for a shade tree if you're looking to landscape. It is important to select a velvet mesquite, which is the native kind. Some nurseries provide Chilean mesquites, things like that. They are not as equipped to withstand our monsoon storms, and they don't provide as much food for our insect eaters. So go for that velvet mesquite tree. Of course, others that provide good food for Lucy's are Palo Verde, acacia, ironwood, and some other native options. And of course, these are excellent pollinator trees. And it is very important to state that whenever we invite birds to use and enjoy our backyard, we have the responsibility to reduce hazards that may be present near buildings. We've already covered cats and insecticides, but another important one is prevention of window collisions. We have more resources that I will send out in an email following this, and you can find it on our website as well. Again, I wanted to include this little picture of my nest box in my backyard in a mesquite tree. If you're having an issue where you haven't had the Lucy's warbler nesting in your installed nest box for the last 1 to 2 seasons, I would recommend reinstalling it in a more secluded location. And this is a picture of mine that's been successful for the last 3 years. And this is just a camera with a wire. Oh, okay, that's much better. So as you can see, it's surrounded by the smaller branches, and you're able to, it's not completely secluded where like the entrances are completely blocked by branches. You don't want that, but you can install it by just the top of the nest box. You don't have to have it installed by the top and the bottom, but I would recommend putting 2 screws in the top of the nest box. And I wanted to ensure to leave enough time at the end for questions. Again, I apologize about my cat, but if I close the door, he's just meowing at the door, so I couldn't do that. So I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing my screen, and so I'll be able to see you all and answer any questions. Kristen.
Thank you so much, Olya. That was amazing. It's funny, no matter how many times I listen to you talk about Lucy's Warblers, I learned something new. So
I don't get tired of talking about them. I just love them so much.
It shows the enthusiasm, the love you have. And I think your cat was clearly very enthusiastic about them as well. So
he's the culprit. I'm sorry. He says sorry. He's very needy. He's
he
an
doesn't
indoor
look
cat,
remorseful at all.
He demands to be played with. Okay.
So I want to, let's see, we had a few questions that were specific about the orientation of the boxes in the trees.
Yeah.
I saw Jenny, thank you so much for jumping in to answer some of those questions. So
thank you, Jenny.
Yeah, the first as you answered was that you don't necessarily have to screw at the top and the bottom. And another question from Carl is, an east-north facing nest box means that the angled top faces east or north, or the openings faced east or north?
Yeah, exactly. That's a good thing to consider, that when we recorded the cardinal direction, we were talking about the front of the nest box. So not where the entrances are facing. So the entrances would be facing on the north facing box, they would be facing east and west. So that is something to consider when we are interpreting those results. But what we were trying to catch is direct sunlight that heats up the nest box itself. So the overhang of the roof, for the most part, prevents any type of like direct sunlight onto it, but it does heat up the nest box.
That makes sense. Thanks, Olya. And then another question from Andrew is, how close should the nest box be to a vertical position? So can it be kind of slanting, I think is the question, since he writes most mesquite branches are oriented diagonally.
Oh yeah, I see what you mean. So what we found that a nest box, so we pretend that this is a nest box, and ideally it is like this, but we've installed it a little bit slanted like this. I wouldn't do it too much where like potentially eggs would fall out or something like that. A slight angle is okay. We've noticed that Lucy's warblers accommodate that by building up a little like lip on the nest, and that's just normal. That it happens in nature, where the branch might not have split in the perfect position or angle, but they make it work with a little bit of like a lip, so that the eggs have a lower chance of falling out and things like that. So a small angle is okay, but do try to put it up vertically, as vertical as possible.
That makes sense.
And a little angle back is maybe a little bit better even than forward.
Yeah, and I think going back to the thing about you only need to use the top screw, so you can have it hanging off of the side of the branch, as you showed in many pictures.
Exactly. If my arm is a branch, so there are some vertical branches that are not a trunk, and you can put up a nest box here, and it might have smaller branches around it to provide that little secluded area for them to nest in. But I've mostly found the perfect secluded area on a branch that's going out like this, and then you just install it by the top and it hangs down like this. But I would put 2 offset screws in the top so that it's a little bit more secure that way, because you're only attaching it by the top.
That makes sense. And then another question is, are there problems with house sparrows, as I've experienced with bluebird nest box monitoring?
House sparrows, we haven't seen any issue in terms of killing the little ones or anything like this, or attempts at nesting. But house sparrows are considered pretty aggressive when it comes to like bluebirds, for example. We haven't had any issue. We have seen them check out Lucy's nest boxes. For the most part, the parents are really good at scaring them off. But I think for the most part, they will be aggressive when they think that they can overtake a cavity and nest there. I don't think the nest box design is particularly attractive to them, and there's a lot of other places that they end up nesting in. So we haven't had that as a problem. In terms of predation, we've had Gila woodpeckers eat the little ones, and when we documented that, we were in the middle of a drought season, so I was wondering if potentially that was the reason. When the food is scarce, other things become much more attractive. But that is part of our study to prevent predation and nest parasitism by cowbirds as well.
Great. And then I saw Jenny jumping in the chat with some of the other questions about native versus non-native mesquites. So Jenny writes that Lucy's are far more likely to use native mesquites, but will use non-native, especially if there are some native mesquites in the area. Native mesquites produce up to 80 times more tiny native insect prey for them. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, if you only have non-native mesquites in your yard, that's okay. But if you have the option to plant a new shade tree, we would recommend going for that velvet native mesquite. Lucy's are resourceful and things, it just makes them work a little bit harder for that insect prey.
All right. Were there any other questions that I missed, or anything that is outstanding that someone wants to? You're welcome to unmute and ask questions.
Yeah. And if you're not sure if your nest box is registered, you can always email me. I can double check, or the ones that you have seen, I can double check if they are registered with us. If you make your own nest box, we would still ask that you register it with us, just so we can keep track of them. And you can provide as much as or as little information about the, we don't post your specific location online anywhere. It's just for our own use.
I have a question.
Yes.
Irene.
You mentioned nest predation. I haven't had any luck with my nest boxes in the front yard. I've done both the Lucy's Warbler and the larger nest box. But I noticed, but in the same front yard, maybe 25 feet away, I have a suet feeder that attracts all kinds of birds. So should I remove the other feeder?
So 25 feet away, it's about as far as my feeder is to my nest box. And I can speak from my experience is that it hasn't been an issue. I probably wouldn't go any closer than that. With that being said, that could just be my pair being pretty tolerant. I can imagine that you could potentially experiment with that and moving the feeders somewhere else a little bit further, so there's a little bit less activity. But that's a good point that you bring up, is that you don't want to install it right at the feeders. The Lucy's don't have to be right next to a source of food either. So don't put them up where there's a lot of bird activity or a lot of like human activity, as they will probably not tolerate it as much. So I would say experiment with it and see if that is the case. But also, if you're, I don't know how your nest box is installed, but maybe moving it to a different location might be the other option that would be more appealing to the Lucy's.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Great question, Irene. So many factors to consider, right?
Yeah, I mean, they can be a little picky, but we're figuring them out, and we're becoming better and better at it every year. So I just,
Cool.
it's so special once you do end up hosting them in your yard and watching them feeding their little babies.
Yeah. Does anyone have any other questions? We have a couple more minutes.
Oh, some time to spare. Excellent. I think it's with your and Jenny's help answering the questions and everything while I was talking. So thank you for that. But there's definitely plenty of time now. And if something comes up later, or if you want to email me a picture of your installed nest box, I can provide my thoughts on like what I think might be better.
Awesome. That's a really awesome offer. Thank you, Olya. And I'll be sure in my follow-up email, I'll include the recording of this presentation, as well as some of these resources that Olya has been mentioning and Olya's contact information. I do also, since we have a minute, I want to plug our upcoming Hawk Watch event. So that'll be mid-March, March 12th to 15th, down in Tucson Audubon will be out in full force. We'll have a whole bunch of staff there. We're going to be doing an optics event, and we will have bird walks along the Dianza Trail, which is a fabulous place to go see Lucy's Warblers. And hopefully by then they'll be here in big numbers and they'll be singing. So
That's right.
Definitely come and join us for that. Olya and I will actually be leading a walk on March 12th, specifically for looking for Lucy's Warblers. So if it's something you're interested in, I know Joanne, you said you feel like you haven't seen one yet, so maybe that's something you want to join with us on. So okay, since there's no more questions, we'll let you all go. Thank you so much for joining us, for spending an hour this afternoon with us, and do get in touch if you have any questions at all. And we hope to see you back for another event soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Have a good rest of your day.